Welcome to Tech Vets, the podcast. Today we are joined by Josh Kime, and he has a very unique story to tell us about his time in the military and where he is now with his civilian career. So, welcome, Josh. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Now, you recently left the Royal Navy, but tell us what you did when you were in the service.
Yeah, so when I joined back in about 2019, I joined as what they call as a HM specialist. So the H stands for hydrography and the M stands for meteorology. So you can kind of specialize in either area you wanted to once you were past basic training. So I went for the hydrography side of things. So that all that means is that we were surveying the seabed and sort of tides, etc. That was kind of our job, and I kind of end up on a ship where you did a lot of deep sea surveying. So that's predominantly what I did when I was in.
And what made you choose that career within the Royal Navy?
So for me, I prior to joining, because it's quite a long onboarding process for this role, is I was in university doing a degree in marine biology and oceanography. So I kind of had like a feel for the sea. I was doing a lot of scuba diving when I was younger as well. So I was like, well, I could be a diver, but I could also do this part. So that's kind of how I kind of fell into doing that sort of role. And so that's where it all stemmed from, really.
And what was the highlight of your career with the Royal Navy?
So it was quite short. So I was only in for about 3.5 years, but I spent a lot of time on it was HMS Scott. So we were everywhere all over the Atlantic. So we got to see a lot of nice places. I'll probably say one of my ending ones when I was doing runs ashore with like the groups that we had made. I think that was probably my biggest highlights from it because a lot of the time we just saw blue seas weeks on end. You'd come back alongside and then you'd go off, do whatever you liked, and then you go out after 5 days and just continue doing that.
Was it always your intent to stay in the Navy for a few years?
So my intent was to try and build a career in there. That was my overall objective. So I kind of wanted to go down the commission route side. The reason why I took the onboarding process so long is that I was trying to get into that prior. So I didn't originally get it, even though like you pass the board and everything. It's like a leadership table. So I was like, okay, well, I'll just join in as a rating, do as much as I can, and then I'll go into that role. Which by when I got on ship, I kind of saw what the people who were officers were doing at that time, and I was like, well, it's not a lot of hydrography and a lot of survey work. So I was like, well, I don't really want to do that from what I can see. And then afterwards, I had a briefing. I was thinking, well, I'll not stay here if I don't see myself getting to that point and don't want to be there. Then I might as well try and leave and find a new career after that.
So when you decided that the Navy wasn't going to give you what you wanted from a career, um, what were your next steps?
So I spent quite a bit of time just thinking about what I wanted to do. I thought, well, I could change branch. I could do something slightly different. I could try going down the sort of diver route because that was one of the other interests I had prior to it. And then I thought, well, I could always do what I'm doing in the Navy outside in civilian world. So I thought, well, I could just take my chances, leave, find out if a a role that's similar in civilian life, or do something completely different. So I quite liked my tech in general, like having a laptop, etc., and playing about in games in general. So I kind of wanted to have the opportunity to explore whatever I wanted instead of be constrained to what was within the military. That was what I was kind of wanting after like about a few months of realizing I didn't want to be in there anymore.
And when you made the decision to leave, were you initially thinking about keeping up the hydrography? Is that the right word? Hydrography?
Yeah, yeah.
Hydrography on the outside.
Yeah, so the original aim as I was like going through the process of leaving was that right, okay, I need to try to figure out what companies there are because the industry we were in, a lot of the people who were in the Navy had friends that had went in civilian roles for various companies. So I was like, okay, so there's a kind of a network. I'll try and explore that and see what I can and can't do. So that was one side of things. And I had like the backup of, well, if that doesn't work, I need to have something just in case. So something tech related. And that's when I started to think about like coding, etc. But the main aim as I was going out was to do that.
What was when you signed off? What was the role of CTP, the Careers Transition Partnership, in your resettlement?
So for what I got, because I was only in for such a short amount of time, I got very little in terms of like financial support, but I got a lot of sort of advice, help, and sort of assistance trying to find a new role in general. So they were very helpful in that sense. So they were helping me with what about the last few months I was in. So probably about from like the February time all the way till May. I was in constant contact with them. They were helping me say, "Oh, this is where you can get courses. These are jobs you can do. These are the things that are coming up. These are the events are happening, etc." So they played quite a big role in helping me find the opportunities and rebrushing up my skills, like for my CV, etc. So I think they play a larger role than I thought they ever would in that sense.
And which programs did they point you towards that made you think, huh, this could be for me?
So one of the when we had the initial interview, they kind of go through like a series of like charities, etc., that you can reach out to, and one of them was Tech Vets, and so that's when I first got exposed to it. And I think I signed up the same day, so I was like, I need to get on it like now. I've only got 3 months. I need to sort it out. And that wasn't with the rep that I had, who was Vicky Hawkins. Well, she was great, but like even prior to that, everyone who I interacted with was quite good. But yeah, they I can't even remember the other things that they recommended at the time. So I think I said either hydrography based or tech related. So I think I kind of shut out everything else and just focused on those things. So mainly it was tech vets that I went for.
And what courses did you access from Tech Vets in the end?
So once I onboard, I think it only took about a week to get onboarded from like signing up, if that. I remember it being really, really quick, but I remember getting straight onto Coursera. So I was immediately like, right, okay. Although I know my hydrography quite well, I don't need to brush up on that. I can kind of make a CV with what I know and don't know. But what I don't really know is my backup and my coding experience. So I was like Coursera, and I think it was the automation with Python course, IT automation with Python. So I immediately started on that. That was a steep learning curve straight away. And then there was the cybersecurity aspect as well. And I signed up for, I think it was just immersive labs at the time. I think it's changed now, but yeah, that's another part. So I was learning about what that type of industry was like as well, and explore and basically just exploring what I liked and didn't like.
What what inspired you out of those courses with Coursera and immersive labs?
So I think it was something that I was missing from the Navy in general was like kind of a challenge, if that makes sense. Because when you're in there, yes, of course, it's physically demanding, it's challenging, especially at the start. But you do find like a very good battle rhythm that you get into doing it. Whereas when I was doing the coding, it was like solve a problem. The problem's going to be different every time. Keep solving, and I was like, all right, that can keep my brain stimulated. I can really find enjoyment in that. And it was the same with the cybersecurity type stuff because it's so vast and you go into so many areas. The sort of the learning process and the problem solving was also there because of how big it is. You can never. I don't think even in most people's lifetimes like you learn absolutely every single aspect that's in it. So I think that's what drew me in was the sort of the challenge of it for me.
And I think with the Tech Vets courses, you mentioned immersive labs and Coursera, but did you make use of any of the pathways into tech events that the Forced Employment Charity runs?
Um, from off the top of my head, I don't think I did necessarily. I think I interacted with a few people from the Tech Vets community, and they were like, "Oh, this here's a website. Have a read this. This will tell you like all of the roles that you can do into cybersecurity, and kind of give you a I wouldn't say a vague roadmap. I'd say it's a lot more defined, but it gives you sort of a that sort of sense of all right, you need to do X, Y, and Z, and this will help you get into this type of role in entry level, etc. I went to a few sort of talks with people who are in the industry explaining what they do, what they kind of focus on, what's kind of current trend, etc., how you get into it. and be able to ask some questions. So I think I spent a lot of time doing that, but I went to the odd job convention, but a lot of it was I felt like it very much based around engineering rather than tech. There was tech companies, but a lot of it was about engineering, oil rigs, etc.
Okay. And did you ever touch on any of the data science courses through TechVets?
Yeah, so I touched through a couple of courses. So there was as I was learning the Python stuff, I started to get sort of a basic level of it. And a course with a company called Arca Blanca came up where it was like an introduction to data science, and they kind of led you through a course of, oh, here's how to use a data set, here's how to use certain packages within Python, and how to analyze data and then create machine learning models. So that was what their course is all based around. And I also did I think it's open fair level one risk assessments. I did that with principal defense as well. So I spent 2 days. I think it might have been over a weekend. I did that with one other person. I did that, and then I passed the exam for that as well. So I did. I was always looking for opportunities as I was try and build something to the CV. But I think those two courses helped a lot.
And you mentioned that the courses were quite challenging in contrast to kind of the routine that you'd got into with the Royal Navy. For
Yeah.
people listening to this, how challenging are the courses? I mean, do you need to have a certain level of ability to access the courses?
No, not necessarily. I think it's when I was in sort of the environment when I was on ship. It was a lot of you knew when you come down to start the day, right? You got X, Y, and Z tasks. Those tasks are very similar. I would say, yes, you engage your brain, but because you've done it so often, you're very comfortable with it. Whereas this constantly makes you keep engaging. I think you need to have the right mindset and motivations to do it. I don't think necessarily the skills are like so far out of reach that you could never do it. I think you just need to spend a bit of time learning, exploring it, a bit like learning a new language for coding, for example. And then once you get that, you're like, all right, I can start applying these things together. And it's just that whole problem solving aspect. If there's any skill to have, I think it's that is a soft skill.
Throughout the retraining process, did you ever sit back and wonder, I'm spending all this time doing this upskilling. Am I actually going to be able to get a job at the end of it? Did that ever cross your mind?
Yeah, quite a lot, I would say. I spent a lot of time learning. I was like, all right, I need to keep doing this. And I got to a stage where I was like, all right, I kind of know a bit about cyber. I have like a surface level type thing. Let's try and create a CV and do things. And I applied to quite a lot of jobs. And so I was reviewing cover letters, I was sending them off. And when I did get to the interview stages, I was getting to the final interview. And I just wasn't making it past that stage. And it tended to be, I think with one of them, I think it was like experience was the only reason why I didn't get it. The other one I think the feedback was that everything was like nigh on perfect. Just the other person just did a little bit extra that was above and beyond. I was like, oh no. But I think that gave me confidence just by just going in and get a benchmark of where I was at really helped with the confidence side of things. But there was a lot of time like, am I going to get a job? I don't know, but I'll keep working towards it and we'll just see how long it takes.
So, how long did it take you from signing off and starting your retraining to getting the job that you're in now?
So for this, it was about just about a year, I would say, or just under a year. So what kind of happened as I was leaving is I got an opportunity to work in private security. So I was working in the center of London as a security guard. They trained me up and everything. And because the shift patterns that I was on was kind of like a 4 days on, 4 days off, 12-hour shifts, days, nights. I got into a good rhythm of doing work, sleeping, time off, could rest, but also I could start learning as well. So I had a lot of opportunities to keep on that continuous learning process. And I don't think I would have done it any quicker, to be honest. I think no matter what, I think with the opportunities that were popping up, I think it was right place at right time. But I think knowledge wise, if that opportunity came up 3 or 4 months earlier, I probably could have done it then. But yeah, I think that's probably the best way to describe it.
So, do you think that's a top tip for other people is to, you know, if they need to, get a job that can fit around upskilling and studying at the same time?
Uh, yeah, definitely. I think if you can find yourself in a situation where you're not sort of so fatigued after a job, I find that that 4 days on, 4 days off really did help. And I know private security has a lot of different aspects to it. There's various sectors which are easier to work in than others. I think the sort of corporate part where I was in was actually quite, I wouldn't say relaxing, but it was definitely not like working in the clubs or bars, etc. So I think that helped a lot. So I think just getting yourself into a situation where you can do that. But I know that not everyone gets that luxury, really.
But I think that's quite an important point to take away is the fact that you haven't expected it to be given to you on a plate. You've carved
Yeah,
out the time to do the upskilling because so many times you speak to people and they can assume that someone's just walked into something or hasn't really worked for it. But the consistent thread through everyone we talk to who's gone through a journey like yours is that they've put in their own time, their own motivation to get where they want to be. And I think that's a really important point to reiterate because no one walks in to a job that betters their life um,
yeah,
without hard work. So bringing us to the current day and the current role you're in, how did you find the job and how did you go through the application process for it?
yeah. So I think from the stuff you were just saying prior as well, I spent a lot of time, like I think with tech vets in general, the interviews I did via their jobs board. I think I was getting an interview regardless at points, but even I think there was one company where it was like need a fully fledged consultant that knew the real industry perfectly. He still took the time to have that chat with me, and he kind of said, "Oh, you don't need to do these courses; just focus on these ones instead, and that will be a lot more beneficial." But in terms of the job now, I found it. I would say by luck, but honestly, I think I had two like good reps or people that I knew within CTP that helped a lot. That showed me the job for the GRC consultancy program that was going through methods, and it was, I think it was like last minute, apply as quick as you can because it's about to disappear type thing. And I remember applying for it when they sent over the information and it disappeared. So I couldn't even see the job role board anymore after it. I was like, oh no, I don't know what I'm gonna do if I get an interview. I can't look back on it. So yeah, that's kind of how I got in. That's how I kind of applied and got into it, and it was incredibly quick. I was expecting it to be taken over like a month, do the interviews against multiple people, but it was like within a week and a half, I think it was. It was really quick.
And the role that you're in now, the one that you applied for that we are just talking about,
Yeah,
is governance, risk, and compliance. So you're a consultant in GRC.
yeah,
Um, did you did you have any trepidation before you went to the interview? How were you feeling?
yeah. So I think prior to the interview, because I had an interview in the year previously where I got the final stage around. I think it was like a stock analyst, so a security operations center analyst, so about defending red team, blue team stuff. So when I went for this interview, I was like, well, I know of some things. I'll brush up my knowledge again. But there was apprehension of what type of questions could they ask because I didn't know too much about GRC in general. But when I got into the interviews, I found from all of the learning that I had done through immersive labs and a bit of sort of the transferable skills I managed to take from all the courses stuff when I was doing Google cybersecurity, the IT automation with Python, and the Google data analytics type stuff. I found that that all kind of managed to play a part in that interview process that I could basically very well articulate like an argument or a point or provide evidence with that training from my previous jobs that I've done to sort of secure that interview.
And how did the interview go? I mean, did they throw you any curveballs that you weren't expecting?
Yeah, so I remember doing the first stage interview of it, and I was like, "Oh, that's great. I'm quite happy with that. That sounded like it went quite well." He's like, "All right, well, we'll just book another interview tomorrow to do the second phase." Like, what second phase? So I was like, I'm sitting there the entire night trying to think what this could possibly be. And then I was presented with a scenario afterwards, and I was like, okay, right, let's see what I can do here. And I worked through the problem as best I can. Again, the whole part of that bit from Python of just thinking of a problem, break it down, talk through how you'd handle it. And I was quite honest as well. I think I did say at one point where I was, if that wouldn't work, then I wouldn't really know, but I'll be thinking about X, Y, and Z after this. I don't know where it would lead me, but that's where my next trail of thought would be. And so that's kind of how I handle it, and it's kind of how I ended up in there, I guess.
And did they give you any feedback after the interview, or how quickly did you find out you'd got the role?
Um, Truth, I can't really remember. I remember being again because the whole process was really quick. Um, I think it was not too long after actually taking the interview, but in terms of feedback, I was pointed to quite a few like online resources that could also have aided for what my task I was doing. So they were like pointing to things like sort of pop something like immersive labs like Meteor Attack example. I knew of it, but I didn't express it in the interview, which would have helped with that scenario that I had. So they were like, yeah, just go read that type of stuff as well. And that has also helped with the actual job in general as well. Like I found that quite beneficial. That a lot of the stuff that I needed for the interview could have been researched online. So that was quite a positive thing.
In terms of the package that you've got from joining your current company, um, how has how does it differ from what you had in the Royal Navy? Are you better off now than you were?
Yeah, for me personally, yeah, I think I'm a lot better off because again, I was just in the able rate. I did spend a lot of time at sea, so in terms of sea days, I was getting a lot of it, and my balance, I think, was a lot better than what some people get in the Navy in general. Like, I think a lot of people get very little time back at home, whereas I was getting very solid chunks. But when I say that, the job that I have now, I feel for me personally, so I get more of my time back to be at home. I find that a lot more valuable. I get to work from home quite a lot as well, which is a very different experience. I never really had that before, so that took a lot to get used to. Um, but yeah, in terms of the way that like financially, I was better off. But again, when I was also in the private security sector, I was very similar, so I didn't really feel that part. But I felt job satisfaction wise, it felt a lot better in general. I don't know how any other way to type of describe it really. And I would probably say I get the blend of both worlds because we weren't the first group to go through a process of what we done. So we had a lot of people who already been in the military. So we kind of came into I wouldn't say culture, but a group of people already that were understood where we'd already been and could talk us through it. And you could talk the same way you did in the military a little bit to kind of, and that just felt quite just nice in general, really, that you felt comfortable.
So talk us through the company that you're with now, because we kind of haven't revealed to
Yeah.
listeners who it is or what they do. So yeah, tell us about the company that you're now happily settled with.
Yeah, so the company I'm with now is called Methods. They're a consultants company as in general, and now I'm part of sort of their cybersecurity portfolio side of things. So that's where my job will rely on whenever I work with clients. I work with the cybersecurity aspect of it all. And what I joined was something they call their Gravitate program. So it's where, for example, veterans that have left, that it opens an opportunity for them to come in and get trained up in a certain area, which is what I've just been through at the moment. I'm on like sort of the tail ends of that now, where I'm still speaking to the previous group that went through who did a similar thing, and just working with them and starting to build up. I wouldn't say confidence, but building up sort of my what's the word for it? Um, like just building up my experience to help and support that sort of the cybersecurity aspect of everything within the company in terms of the governance, the risk and compliance.
For other people who are listening whose ears have just pricked up by the mention of a veterans program within a company, um, what would you say are the benefits to someone leaving the services and joining a company that has a dedicated veterans program?
I think it's I think the understanding of it is really good because I think some companies don't fully see the benefit of sort of pulling somebody who is a veteran into their company. Because when you go through something like the military army, I can only really speak for the navy in general, but you get a lot of soft skills, but you don't really get the know-how how to express them. So you'll learn how to present, you'll learn how to communicate, reconfirm with people, etc. But there's no way of expressing that to somebody. But what I find with, especially with methods, is that they understand that's already there. So they kind of can leverage that and make you feel comfortable and explain to you that you have these skills. Just use them like this, and you'll be absolutely fine, type thing. They do a lot of that, and I think that's absolutely great. I think it's that understanding, and it makes you feel more comfortable. I felt very, I would say, insecure as I was leaving. So I was like, well, I'm not going into a job. What am I going to do, type thing. Whereas I think if you went straight from the military into that, I think you still get the apprehension, but it goes away much quicker than it would when I moved into the private sector for private security. I still had a bit of long and thinking, did I do the right thing or not?
So it was how has your life changed since joining Methods?
Changed a lot for me personally. One aspect of it is that I moved to London, so that was a big change in general. But also, I get to work from home now as well, so I have a lot of I wouldn't say it's not. It doesn't feel like spare time, but that whole commute time that you usually have is just gone, and I feel like there's a lot more. I feel a lot more relaxed, and I can get to do my own thing a bit more. Whereas I've got more time to go in the gym in the morning, for example, and when I finish, I can do something straight after. I think from that perspective, like it's life changing. It was very hard to get used to, but that's when the people I've been working with who were in the previous group, they were really good to talk to, because they could kind of understand the whole military mindset that you kind of built up over the years, and like you don't need to worry, you can relax. It's all good. So yeah, I would say it's changed quite a lot. I would say I'm still adjusting to it in general, but I would say I'm on the tail end of that now. I'm feeling very comfortable working on my own and go when I'm not going to the office, type thing, and communicating with people over things like Teams or Zoom or WhatsApp or etc. Like if pure by pure electronic contact, I would say I'm feeling a lot more comfortable in that.
And looking to the future, and you've already said you've clearly got the growth mindset of learning. What are the next things that you're going to set yourself the challenge of achieving?
So for me, I kind of want to have the opportunity to kind of see how far I can push myself. So put myself in very challenging environments. The way that I plan to do it, I'm not sure yet, whether it's going to be through like a series of qualifications or just through putting myself in positions with methods where I can get very good experience and just work to a very high standard. I haven't fully decided on what I want to do yet, but I am leaning towards more of the do less qualifications, do more, do more hands-on work. 'Cause that's how I personally learn. I find that a lot better. I find that the theory is good, but I don't want to put time in to use like 20% of it, for example. That's my concern. I don't believe that that's fully true, but my concern is with there with that. And from the people I've been able to meet as well and network with, a lot of them say that it's not necessarily needed in that sense. But I think if you were to not be in that position and be sort of kind of trying to get that job role, the one of the bits of advice I got was to, for example, CompTIA was not to go for the A plus one, just go straight for Network Plus if you think you can sort of pass that exam, because that'll look just as good as having A plus on there. So I did start working towards that. during my learning time, but I got other parts of like data analytics. I got really interested in that for quite a while. So yeah, that's probably my answer to that. Really, is kind of depends on your situation.
That's a really good answer. And I think if people are listening and they're interested in finding out more about the Methods Veterans Programme or talking to you, what's the best way for them to, well, firstly, are you happy for them to get in touch with you? And if so, what's the best way of them finding you?
Yeah, so I think the best way for like in terms of like finding out more, etc. Because I found this is probably the bit I found most difficult. Like personally for me, I wouldn't mind anyone reaching out to me personally, say, all right, well, what did you do? And I can kind of talk them through what I did, etc., and what I learned parts. And I think it's just keep an eye on the Methods website to see what they're doing. So I think they're constantly putting posts out, announcing things, etc. So I'm not in that sort of loop of what they're doing as of like that. I know I went through the Gravitate program with them, but I didn't really see the inner workings or anything like that. But what I could definitely do is kind of give my take on how I got to where I was and kind of my thought process during it. But I do think that's one of the most difficult parts of it is knowing where you should be going and what you should be looking out for. But I think GRC in general, if you're looking for any type of job role, is quite a good starting point to work with, even though it might not feel like the funnest one, like for example, penetration testers, ethical hackers, etc. I think it's a very good way of entering the industry.
That's some really good advice. So yeah, look at GRC, and it's not as boring as you think it might be, basically.
Yeah, definitely. Like I didn't know what to expect from it, but from now what I've done, I'm like, well, the problems again, because for me it's all about the problem solving, the challenge of it. Like there's infinite amount of problems that I can see that arise with it. I'm like, well, this is where I wanted to be in general, so I'm happy with that.
And to round up our interview today, if you could go back to yourself in the Navy, in May 2023 when you signed off, is that correct, or when you left?
Yeah, it's about then.
What advice would you say to that guy if you could go back and talk to your slightly younger self?
Yeah, I think if I was to go back to that time, it's quite an interesting one because for me, I've kind of always kind of trusted the gut instinct I've got with things. So I'd probably say to myself is just to continue trusting that. And I've, it's such an odd one because that alone might not get you anywhere. I think it's just keeping that drive and motivation. I'll be telling myself just like, don't worry, just remind yourself. If it has to be every month or every week, just keep reminding yourself. It's even through the lows and the highs. Just keep going with it. Even if you're doing that little bits, like the marathon, not sprint type of situation, just keep doing little bits and keep yourself in it. Or else, for example, if I think back to my hydrography stuff now, it's very rusty. But whereas I found with my cybersecurity and Python data analytics, because I've been doing little bits over the past year, it's worked out. So I would say just keep doing what I plan to do. Yeah.
That's brilliant. And Josh, thank you so much for joining me today. And for anyone who's listening, if you want to find out about some of the courses that Josh has mentioned, like immersive labs, like Coursera, like the Arca Blanca data, Python, how to get into GRC, you can head to the TechVets website, which is www.techvets.co, and you'll be able to look at the pathways into cybersecurity and roles in tech via that website. So thank you, Josh, and I will leave you to get back to work, and hopefully we can catch up soon when you finish the Methods Veterans Programme, and we'll find out what your next challenge is that you've set your sights on.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much. It'd be great. Cheers.
Thank you.